Reads, selection intersects with the broader forces shaping our politics and culture this election cycle. I'm now very pleased to introduce the intellectual architect of this event, our Dean for Diversity, Equity, Inclusion, and Justice, and good friend, Professor Yvette Cozier. Professor Cozier will introduce our speaker and lead today's conversation. Yvette, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dean Galea, for that introduction. It's my pleasure to be moderating today's discussion. I now have the privilege of introducing today's speaker, Arlie Russell Hochschild, Professor Emerita of Sociology at the University of California at Berkeley. Professor Hochschild is the winner of the Ulysses Medal, as well as Guggenheim, Mellon, Fulbright, and Sloan grants. She is the author of 10 books, including Second Shift, The Managed Heart, and The Time Bind, as well as this year's SPH Reads selection, Strangers in Their Own Land, which was a finalist for the National Book Award. Professor Hochschild's most recent book, Stolen Pride, Loss, Shame, and the Rise of the Right, was released by the New York Press this week. We are delighted to have her with us today. Just as a reminder for our audience, the format of today's conversation will be a moderated question and answer discussion, followed by some initial remarks by Professor Hochschild. When we have about 20 minutes left in the program, I'll turn to the audience for questions. Please submit questions using Zoom's Q&A function located in the bottom middle of your screen. Professor Hochschild, I will now turn things over to you.
Professor Hochschild, I think you're on mute.
Hi, thank you so much. I really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. I thought in the short amount of time we have here that I would try and do three things. One is to kind of update us what's happened since 2016 when Strangers was published. What's happened to the feelings of the people it traced, and to update the deep story. And the second thing I'd like to do is to follow up a theme that's undeveloped, I feel, in Strangers, but that I lift out in my new book of Pride and Shame. And then if we have time, I'd like to update my connection with some of the characters, people that I feature in the book. So first, in 2016, I didn't know how serious and scary the trend that I was trying to understand would become. We now know that, just to speak publicly about this, that Donald Trump is again running for president, that that his followers believe what he says. And I guess the purpose of my interest in these last two books is to try and get Democrats and people on the left to hear and understand people on the right as something that we need to do if we're going to move forward. So, in Strangers, I had this idea that politics is emotional, basically. And if you strip away what people believe is right and wrong and strip away their views on this and that policies, there's a feeling, and best evoked by a story. And the story was what I came to call deep story of the right, is that you're standing in line and you've been there a long time. The line isn't moving. One guy told me, no, I haven't had a raise in a decade. Okay. And you've been waiting, at the head of the line is, as you know, the American dream. This person is not looking back at him, where there are many more people. He's just looking ahead and doesn't know where in line he actually is. And then he's focused on these line cutters. And who are they? They are women. They are Blacks. They are immigrants, they are refugees, they are well-paid public sector workers, and they are even endangered species because the government's spending more time on animals than people, so on. And then he sees that Barack Obama and other Democratic officials have been, they feel, sponsoring these other groups, pushing them back, and then insulting them. That's a deep story. I went ahead to another region, Appalachia, in the new book, Stolen Pride. And there's an update to that deep story. The update to that deep story is that in that line, the right-leaning person sees a bad bully who is making policies that disadvantage them, it's felt. And then there's what they're seeing as a good bully. Who is the good bully? Well, that's Donald Trump, someone who may not be perfect. They will tell you, oh, we know he's not a real Christian. Oh, we know he has many moral flaws, but he is our bully, therefore the good bully in line. So that's the update as we go into this next election. And what I mean in this book to do is to help us all be bilingual so that we can hear and see from another person's, the other side's, from my point of view, the other side's point of view. And what I think is happening is that a lot of us say, oh, Donald Trump is chattering on, he's digressing, it's silly talk, and they're crazy or stupid to be duped by him. And what I want to do is, that's too easy and too common. And what I mean to do is to evoke our capacity to be bilingual, that we can speak rationality, but we can also speak and hear emotions. And that the major emotions, I think, here are pride and shame. That's what's being tapped by the political rhetoric, I believe, of the right now. So let me say a little more about that. How does that work? I think Donald Trump, first we have people who've given up on the government. And so they think, well, look, the government's never going to hear who I am and look at me and see what I need, recognize me, then I'm going to turn to a charismatic leader who's as big as the government. That's the worldview. And if he says, look, I alone can solve all these problems, you think, well, finally, we need a giant because we can't trust the real government. So a charismatic leader leads not through policies, but through connection to his followers. So we need to tune in. What is he saying to his followers? How are they hearing him? How could it make sense? And I think it goes like this. You have 42% of the American population are white and non-BA, and they have been sinking economically. And the whole social logic that goes with sinking, which is more disrupted families, more diseases of despair, as they're called, suicide, alcoholism, drug addiction, and a kind of a story of loss, okay? And this white sector sees other sectors, that is whites with BAs, are doing fine, doing better. That would be more the Democrats. And see blacks doing better too. They're doing the American dream, working hard and getting there. So they feel both relative and absolute loss. How does that loss then, how does a charismatic figure tap into that? I think in the following way, because a lot of people in rural areas deeply proud, but they've lost their jobs. They've not been able to get a job as good as the one they had or their father had, sinking. I think it happens in 4 moments, this anti-shame ritual. Donald Trump will say something in moment one provocative. He'll say, all immigrants are poisoning the blood of America. Okay. Something provocative, moment one. Moment two, the punditry shames him. Punditry says, oh, you can't say that. We're an immigrant society. What do you mean? Moment three, Donald Trump becomes the victim of the shamers. And, oh, look how they're picking on me. Look how hard it is for me. You know, they're shaming me. Haven't you been shamed too? I am your vessel. I'm suffering for you, taking that shame. And then in moment four, there's the Donald Trump roar back in defense of the shamed. And I feel like number one and two, Democrats can hear, and three and four, Republicans can hear that they feel vindicated. They too have been shamed. And that in a way, loss of pride has been the kind of ore that's being mined by politicians, and something we have to attune to. Let me just add the third point is that some of the people that I wrote about in Strangers have become part of my life. Sharon Galicia in the preface, for example, brought her children to come visit my husband and I in Berkeley, California, see how, quote, the other half lived. I took them to lectures at Berkeley by Robert Reich, for example, and her just 2 days ago at a book talk I was giving in Washington, D.C. at Politics and Prose, I saw Sharon Galicia's son, who is a Democrat, and had come to hear me talk. So still in touch. Let me end there and open out for any discussion.
Great. Well, thank you for that. Thank you. There's so much there. I just want to step back a little bit and talk about one of the broader concepts that you sort of alluded to in your opening there, but it was that one of the great paradox. Focusing on why members in the, characters in the book, members of the Lake Charles community, were on one hand very opposed to the government. And certainly the stance that many of us in public health would take is that, the government, the public, there is to protect the public. And so these individuals were opposed to environmental regulations, for example, they were opposed to the EPA. Nevertheless, they were being adversely affected by the pollution that went about as a result of EPA regulations being rolled back in their state. And if I can just read a short passage from your book, and you state, I wanted to get up close. The best way to do that, I thought, was to come to know one group of people in one place, focusing on a single issue. This issue was not a case, as mentioned earlier, of well-to-do voters voting down government measures they themselves didn't need. Everyone I talked to wanted a clean environment. But in Louisiana, the great paradox was staring me in the face. Great pollution and great resistance to regulating polluters. If I could truly enter the minds and hearts of people on the far right on the issue of the water they drink, the animals they hunt, the lakes they swim in, the streams they fish in, the air they breathe, I could get to know them up close. Through their views on this keyhole issue, how much, if at all, should government regulate industrial polluters? I hoped to learn about the right's perspective on a wider range of issues. I could learn about how, emotionally speaking, politics works in us all. So along these lines, and we are public health practitioners largely at the School of Public Health and on Zoom today, although there may be others. How can we use the approach to view the great paradox? How can we use that in our approach?
Yeah, it's a wonderful question that, and we have to look at, for example, COVID, where public health professionals have been trying their very hardest to lower the enormous death rate. The death rate has been higher in red states that fear the government and lower in blue states. And it's true for Louisiana, who actually, I know people that have died of COVID. And actually, Annette Areno is not feeling well. Mike Schaff has had cancer. This isn't an abstract thing. So I think what we know is that the best way to have people understand what public health professionals have to offer is to actually make contact and sit down and talk with people, and just first start. And there's no one who would be better at it than, I think, public health. It sort of attract a certain kind of person with a heart that can be felt on the other side. And in a way, turn your alarm system off to begin with, and just say, well, how do you feel it's about COVID? And have you been hurt by it? How's it go? So one-to-one conversations, crossing the empathy bridge, and being emotionally bilingual. And you can start with people on the Republican side who agree with you on public health measures and who know the data. Shots help prevent COVID. And so, yeah, it's not hard. That's the funny thing. You can actually do it. It's not hard at all. And people took me from Berkeley, California. I mean, I have a big label on my head, and you Google me and double label. You know, they know I am an outsider. They know it. They know it. And then I'll tell them, you know what? I'm from outer space, but I'm really interested. There's a big divide here, and they'll say back, and I'll say I'm writing a book about it. And they'll say back, yeah, we're worried about the divide too, but we feel stereotyped. And I say, yeah, I get that. But you know what? I feel a little stereotyped too. Then we have that in common, okay? You know, it's enough in common that you get started and come with your alarm system, not suspended, but off, so that you're hearing, you're bilingual, you're getting what they care about in these conversations. So that's what's to learn, I think.
Thank you. And another concept that you talked about in the book, and you did so also in your intro, was about the deep story. And one of the points that you made in the book about the deep story is that the right has a deep story, and you know, a lot of your book was learning about that. The left has a deep story as well, right? So again, just sort of illustrating the deep story, how can we get, again, people to focus on this and to recognize it's something that both sides share?
Yeah. Well, you know, it's funny, people didn't ask me a lot about my beliefs. It's funny how rare that was. It would be, I would be going to the car, and just at the last moment, oh, do you have family? Are you, who are you? It seemed to be saved for the last. They thought it was a little intrusive or impolite to ask, but, and I would tell them, I'll tell you anything that you want to know. But they, what was the question? Sorry, I lost myself.
Oh,
the left deep story. it's in Strangers, is that we're actually not in a line competing with each other for scarce spaces. We're in a circle. And this is my version of the deep story. There could be others, but I think the left deep story is, and we are circling public service. We are actually, it is a state-of-the-art children's science museum. It was built with public funds. It's available to all children, rich or poor. And the people around this happily pay taxes, actually, for a public service like that. And many of them participate in it, are public servants. And then in the left wing deep story, someone with a giant excavator comes and digs out the concrete foundation of that publicly shared service and takes the foundation and builds a McMansion in a gated community. And that's infuriating to the left. This is, I think, why we're upset. It's one reason. There are others, but there are different versions and chapters of our story too.
Yeah, I like that illustration. Either it's a line or it's a circle, but the feelings are roughly the same in a lot of ways. The passion behind it. So, I wanted to also, you mentioned again, kind of the empathy divide or the empathy wall. And, how as public health professionals, how as those of us who, again, are called to really work on the public's behalf, how can we embrace that empathy bridge? And maybe you could actually even describe what the empathy bridge is, as you laid it out in the book.
Yeah, a lot of people are frightened to cross it, I think, and rigidly opinionated and can't get, which often is inspired by fear, rigidity. So what it is getting to know people that in your world seem like the other. And who is it that crosses that bridge? I made another recent discovery, which I'll add here. There are two kinds of people that are especially good at crossing bridge. And there's a social logic to those two kinds of people. One are people who've done well in some way with their lives, have achieved their own goals, feel like giving back, a noblesse oblige, and they reach out from there. That's one bridge. There's another where people do just the opposite. You drop down to the bottom and recover and reach down to others on the bottom that you don't know. In both cases, people have become unafraid of shame. The top people don't have it because their life logic didn't confront them with it in big time. We all feel shame, we all dread it, but minimize it. And the bottom, I talked to recovering heroin addicts and recovering alcoholics, people suffering from diseases of despair, so-called, young men. And one man said, I'm not afraid of shame. I've already been shamed. I'm on the side of it. And I'm relieved to be, having been on the bottom and now out of it, reaching out from there. So we have kind of these two life logics, two bridges. And the people in the middle who don't fit each one are a little more, I think, reluctant. So that's in one example. the top bridge that I've encountered more recently is a man who was born in a very poor trailer park and but did well in school, became a teacher, and from there he reached out. He was actually a minister, and he put a peace pole up, and he talked to his students about George Floyd and these white working class students that he was teaching couldn't get over that George Floyd was a criminal and done bad things. And he ended up saying, well, Jesus Christ was seen as criminal, and so shocking them, but try to reach out. So that's the top. And the bottom was a man who nearly died of an overdose. He's white, and he was reaching out to Black addicts. And so there are these pathways, and what it means to be on that bridge is to be curious and be interested. Allow yourself to really reach out. Don't be afraid of difference. And it's good things happen from it, I think. And there are bridge builders on the other side, actually, who we don't even know about. I mean, just say that I got, after Strangers in Their Own Land, I got a letter, a handwritten letter from an evangelical preacher in Eastern Kentucky. I'm sorry, Eastern Texas. And he said, I have read your book, and you describe the people I come from. You describe the people I serve in my church. You describe me. But thank you. I thought, what? I couldn't believe this next paragraph. Thank you for writing this book and for coming to study us. And he didn't like Donald Trump, but so we had that little crossover. He was disturbed by Trump. And so he ended his letter saying, so imagine that there are good news that could come from, of all places, Berkeley, California. And I wrote him back, thank you very much for your laudatory words. And it's sincerely yours, your friend from Berkeley, California. He too has come to visit. Turns out he was an outreacher, and his daughter wanted to go into social work. And what school did I recommend? So nobody's quite as simple as they look on that other side.
Wow, that's a powerful example. Thank you. I want to step back a little bit and just learn a little bit more about you. Can you just, share a little bit more about your background and what led you to the field of sociology in the first place?
Sociology, well, I'll tell you, my father's job took us to different countries. And when I was 12, I felt plucked out of the life I was used to. And we were assigned to Israel. And so I was put into a Scottish mission school with kids who all spoke Hebrew. On the playground, the school was very strict, and you have to stand up. Good morning, Miss Minty. Class, be seated. And I didn't know anybody. I was the only American there. I was a head taller than anyone. I was dressed funny. I had these Oxford shoes that people look at. I didn't speak the language. I was a fish out of water. It was very painful. I went home to my mother. She said, well, how was school, dear? I just wept. And she said, well, if you still hate it 3 weeks from now, I'll send you home to Grandma and Grandpa in Boston. Weep. So I felt stuck as the stranger. And it was worst and the best thing that ever happened to me, because I indeed, did adapt. And you're 12, you're going to make close friends. I did. But I came home from, and I didn't fit in there either. I got used to not fitting in. And so when it came to what to study in school, the only thing that really called me was sociology. It was like, how can I get to be a stranger in my own land? Because that's what I feel like. And it was such a gift, such a great gift to be kind of slapped side my face a little early in life. And so I wanted to, I'm I'm a liberal. I am what Berkeley predicts. But that different kind of liberal, the one that's interested in strangers meeting, getting to connect, and good things coming out of it. I would say that's what drew me to what I do.
Wow.
And I love doing it, by the way. It's not hard. People say, oh, how can you talk to these people? No, I feel like on a treasure hunt looking for insights from that other side.
So before we turn this over to Q&A, I wanted to ask you about your 4 pillars of activism. You laid that out in the afterword of the paperback edition. And the things that you mentioned was to affirm the fragile system of democracy, recognizing that the Democratic Party in particular must address the grievances, life experience, sense of losing ground of people like those in the book. Voting, the importance of voting. And then, as you know, we talked about the empathy bridge, reaching out across the partisan divide. What can you talk a little bit about one or more of those? And again, how, for those of us, activism is a big part of public health as well. And we want to be successful in our activism, and not so much turning people to our view, but to getting the things that we want to deliver in public health. Can you give us, again, some advice in the format of those pillars?
Yeah, great question. In voting, at this moment, of course, speaking as a private citizen, get yourself, like my granddaughter, to a crossover state and get out the vote. I think is a little time to lose. It's hugely consequential. But I think for talking across the divide, again, it's good to go to who the opinion leaders are on the Republican side. For example, there is a woman, Catherine Hayhoe, who is a Republican, and whose husband is a minister in the Republican, also a Republican. But she's a climate scientist, and she talks to people across that divide. I would go to her, and whoever when I did, I would say, oh, did you know about Catherine Hayhoe? And that led me to discover there's something called the Green Tea Party. Well, what's that? And so tell people on the other side, they're not alone. Put them in touch with the Green Tea Party person's Facebook has a gun, picture of a gun on it. So you're not going to agree with this person, but accept on climate. So the same could be true with public health workers. You can say, I've noticed that there's a high death rate in this county. It's really a pity. There's wonderful people here, but it's not so high over in this other area. And here I have a church leader who thinks that inoculations really work. Let's maybe have a meeting with the church leader. He's giving a talk. I'll invite you to come. Work through local leaders they trust. And so that's a thing to add to this advice for crossing the empathy bridge.
Thank you. So we have some very robust questions here. So the first one, the writer says, I very much enjoyed your book and found the metaphor of waiting in line to be a useful way to think about people's rancor regarding being left behind. But what are they waiting in line for? Many of the people you wrote about have homes, cars, friends, and strong church ties. What do they think they will have when they arrive at the front of the line?
That's great. What they think they're going for, what they want, what they aspire to is a kind of American dream that we must itself reform, which I say in my next book. And it is based on the image of a man, not a woman, who works hard and rises up and earns more. It's all financial, earns more than his father did. That's the American dream. You look, Dad, look how well I did. That's the core of the American dream. It's class-based and it's upwardly mobile. But we need to ask, actually, is more always good? Do we need 3 times as many plastic bottles polluting the ocean as we have? Is that a good goal? Why does it have to be comparative? And what's enough? And a lot of people actually privately do improvise their own American dream. And then our task then is to honor it. But I have talked to a young couple who said, well, we're really proud to be happily married. Nobody around us is happily married. My parents on my side, my wife's parents on her side, all our relatives. And so that's our American dream, right? Another man, it was, the dream of being a good Christian. Movement people have a dream of really improving the goal they care about. That's our dream, to have an improvement in the society we live in. So I think there needs to be more public discussion about the character of the dream. What's gone haywire is that Hillary Clinton and many Democrats are talking about the upwardly mobile image, are reinforcing this old ideology, the American dream, and it's not being heard by the downwardly mobile dominant ethnic group. That's the disconnect.
See. Great. Another question. It sounds like the role of shame overshadows any data or information that might ostensibly influence those being shamed to work collaboratively with the left on solutions. The questioner talks with many people on the left who deeply fear the potential outcomes of this shame by whatever name. What is your advice to the center regarding specific interventions using public health language that might help us meet in the middle and work more collaboratively?
Let me share with you an interview in the next book of Stolen Pride, follow-up. a man who grew up very poor and in a trailer court. He said, I'm poor and I'm trailer trash. I'm poor, I'm white, I'm unemployed, I'm disabled, I'm dumb, wasn't dumb. And I'm not anybody you'd want to meet. He said, but I don't see difference between people, me in my white trash situation, and a lot of Blacks who are caught in inner cities. You know, we've got, we're poor, they're poor. We're in jail, they're in out of jail. We've got violence, we've got crime, we've got drugs, they've got to deal with drugs. What's the difference? Except for the music. We got twangy and tragic, and they've got rap. So I went around with that idea to some other people, and one guy said, oh, haven't you heard of hillbilly rap? So I began to think maybe there's something the culture and artistic community could make there, the connection at that level, that politics and was restraining us from recognizing. There's a new book out by one of my heroes, William Barber, on white poverty. And that he's going for this crossover and this empathy bridge. All of his work has been about that. And we need to strengthen that.
Yeah, and so just, another question, kind of, you start to mention this. The question is, having those one-on-one conversations is important, but challenging to implement at a population level. So, you kind of mentioned, how do we kind of pull those bridges on a bigger level? And how can we learn from these individual conversations to make
Well, I would again go to who they trust, and maybe have some small groups. There are 52 different private groups, and we have a lot to learn from how these work. It's called the Bridge Alliance, and they have funny names like Hi from the Other Side, Living Room Conversations, and I have participated in those. But if you could get a living room conversation, say 8 people over coffee, some from the left, some from the right, at a leadership level, and it's reasonable people, and to talk over this very issue, and in that group, some who really get where you're coming from, and together with some who don't. It would, and then a series of meetings. So I would add, I understand that one-on-one, it isn't always possible and kind of slow, but this can be done at a group level. There's another example of people in Lake Charles who didn't believe in climate change. Mike Schaff, for example, I'm the guy who opens the book. No, I'll worry about climate in 20 years. No, haha. And but I pointed out to him, actually what I did, I invited my son down, who was a big activist, climate activist in California. I said, okay, I'm just going to hold the tape recorder. We'll go out in a boat and fish. And you guys, you duke it out. I'm gonna listen to how this happens and write about it. And my son and I did do a New York Times op-ed, 2019. You can look at left-right differences on climate. Anyway, what's relevant to the public health issue here is this man's authorities, the CEO of the oil company he worked for, said, oh, climate's real. We're diversifying. Military that he admires, way ahead on climate. So if you point to who he admires, and say, well, these are the people you admire, funny thing, they really believe in climate. That would work.
Okay. No, that's a good strategy. Another comment is this person says something that they've struggled with since January 6th is how do we cross the empathy bridge in the face of violence?
Yeah. Right. My next book focuses on January 6th, and it focuses on denialism and what could back it up. It is gotten to a scary point, which I say in this next book. What can we do about it? It's funny when you sit down, and as I have with one guy who said, I'm a law and order man. I'm law and order. And he was a small businessman in Pikeville, Kentucky. And I said, law and order. Okay, what do you make of January 6th? And I didn't like it. I think they were Antifa dressed up. The anti-fascist, he thought, were pretending to be Trump's followers. And then that turned out not to be true. I says, no, it really was. And he was flummoxed. He was in a pride-shame mashup because things he was proud of, proud of America, were now people were being locked up and shamed. And I didn't change his mind about this. I do after we talk, talk turkey a little bit. And he would minimize it. And this is how denial works. I am so interested in denial. We really have to understand denial on both sides, actually. But he said, well, where they hung that noose, to kill Mike Pence, well, it was a pretty small platform it was on. And then another person said, well, they were just blowing off steam. You know how guys in high school are, a minimization. These are all shades and types of denial. And I think it's with us, and you just wear it down. But it's there because I think they were too abashed to see how badly they'd messed up, and that their great savior was leading them to the big crash. Some have drifted away from that. Some have not, that I've most recently talked to. But they're still looking for their big bully. I wouldn't count on a decline.
Just another really good question, and thank you, audience, for these wonderful questions. Does leadership, thinking about governors, mayors, local pastors, do leadership share in the deep story, or are they simply exploiting it?
It goes both ways. I think a lot of them are more moderate than the base and are exploiting it. Yeah. Or seeing where the advantages are. I talked to most recently, to some ministers in very conservative denominations, and they would say, oh, Donald Trump, between us, he's not a Christian. No, but he's useful to us. So, supporting the lie, but finding a pragmatic use in right-wing beliefs. Yeah. More moderate than the base.
Okay. I'm just trying to get in a couple of pieces of questions before we run out of time. Another a question was, do you feel like the weakening of labor unions in particular, contribute to this divide that we see?
It's a marvelous point. Entirely. I felt that in my interviewing, I could kind of hear the presence of, if a relative had been in a labor union, they were far more likely to be liberals and see the world through liberal eyes. Even if they weren't the member of the union, but someone in their family was. Oh, my dad was, with the United Auto Workers. Well, my dad was, with the coal mine workers. So, yes, I feel that actually labor unions have been the middleman between the white working class and the Democratic Party, and that they're gone now because of offshoring. Only like 9% of the private sector are unionized, and that we haven't found a way of creating a force as powerful as the labor union to make that connection.
Yeah. I mean, there's obviously efforts to build it up again, but it's not likely to be what it once was.
Yeah.
Let's see, just come to another. This other question is the loss of local journalism a major contributor to the phenomenon as well?
Yes, absolutely. And local bookstores and a whole culture. Yeah, it's as if the whole society is kind of polarized, both culturally and economically. And journalists, my husband teaches in the journalism department at Berkeley, and people still come and train in it. Great people with great ideas, but there are fewer jobs going out. We talked with a friend who teaches at USC, who's got the idea of getting grants to high school journalism departments, the head of school newspapers. And, have you covered the homeless news? What's going on? That's part of your education. What kind of health do they have? I mean, to sort of encourage it through a different channel. But basically, yes, we need to ultimately alter this winner-take-all model that's overtaken journalism as so much else.
Well, we are almost at time, and I just wanted to have enough time to thank you profusely for everything that you have contributed to this book, the discourse around this topic. I think we have learned quite a bit, and I, for one, appreciate the challenge of trying to meet halfway on at least on that empathy bridge. So I truly thank you for that. And I look forward to reading the new book, and maybe we'll talk again. But in the meantime, I'd like to turn this back over to Dean Galea.
Thank you, Dean Cozier, and thank you, Professor Hochschild. As I mentioned earlier, I ordered your new book before this call, and here I speak now. I am really looking forward to reading it. I think the work you have done has been really the most important work of scholarship that has emerged in this country in helping us understand each other at a time when at times it feels like we are not only not in the same country, but living on different planets. I think if more people thought carefully about what you've been writing, the country and the world would be a better place. So thank you for what you've been doing, and thank you for spending the time with us. I really enjoyed listening to you. Take good care.
Thank you so much for what you're doing. Really, it's extraordinary. You are on an empathy bridge with me. So
Thank you.
wonderful. Thank you for what you're doing.
Everybody, thank you.